drag the markets lower?
We're still having, lack of conviction from investors on the banking sector reforms. Now that we're closing into the holidays, I think that it's very unlikely we see, any strong catalyst to push the markets any higher. But I think outlook still remains relatively strong. So in the coming year, we could see quite a strong performance on the Nigerian Stock Exchange as we see some transactions on the weak banks, and we see more earnings numbers on their full-year results.
Esili, touching on Dangote Cement, a lot of concern that perhaps the company is not going to reach its 2010 forecasts, supporting the view perhaps that the valuation was relatively aggressive when it listed a month ago. Would you agree with this?
Well, it's a possibility. The first 9 months of operation had a bit of challenge as well, but they were down about roughly 5% on their forecast. But given performance on the fourth quarter, it's possible that they could catch up with what they had told investors they could do. I mean, Stanbic IBTC in particular is raising its, we see scope to raise our outlook on the company 2010. Having visited the plant quite recently and heard stories from management about how they've been operating around about over 100% utilization rate for the fourth quarter. I think there is possibility they meet those targets.
Looking at the talk about a secondary listing on the London Stock Exchange, should we see a repricing, revaluation of the company? Perhaps if we do see it disappointing with its full-year earnings, how do you think this is going to impact the share price going forward?
I think that's a very strong possibility, and that's where we're actually thinking. We think the listing on the LSE, given the size of liquidity, they've mentioned anywhere between $3 billion to $5 billion, that would create substantial liquidity, and given that it's being placed with more sophisticated investors that know how to value this company more so, they're a lot long-tailed. I think that you'll likely see the company's stock move closer to where we think the value is, which is about roughly 150 cover.
Let's touch on another cement producer, Lafarge WAPCO. Looking at this particular stock, we know it's also had its own set of problems, but also very strong in the Nigerian market. If you had to pick between the likes of Dangote Cement or Lafarge, which would you be buying at this point?
We're a lot more aggressive on Dangote Cement. We like it because by 2011 it'll have a market share of 70% by capacity, and that naturally would draft the likes of Lafarge WAPCO with a market share of 15%. In that time, this is even having added new capacity of 2.2 million tons in 2011. So we like Dangote from that angle. The fact that it also enjoys very relatively low gas pricing, also compared to Lafarge, is also a very strong reason why we like that company. It is relatively more efficient from an operation standpoint. I mean, the plants overall are barely more than 2 years old, and so they are more efficient than the Lafarge WAPCO's plant that have been around for an average of about plus 15 years.
What about possible corporate action with Esili Cement? There is speculation out there, and of course this following the merger of the likes of Benue Cement and Dangote Cement. Do you think we could see more consolidation in the industry?
I think it's a smart thing to do. Where you have a dominant player like Dangote Cement, as I mentioned, 70%, and you have 15% market share, I think the natural thing to do would be to consolidate. Sadly, Esili, which is a subsidiary of Lafarge, would have only a market share of about 4%. So if you add 4 to 15, 19% isn't significant enough to compete with Dangote. But I think it puts those two companies in a position where Lafarge will be more keen to raise capacity locally.